This Hour, Bible Theology Live, Episode 8, Moses, the Friend of God, Exodus chapter 33, verse 11. A few words about Jacob and his children. In the last episode, we talked briefly about Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob as Israel's patriarchs. We need here to add that Jacob had 12 children from whom the 12 tribes of Israel would come up. Joseph, one of Jacob's children, was sold by his brothers into Egyptian slavery. There, Joseph became the manservant of the high official Potiphar. Genesis 39 is a beautiful story about Joseph's chastity that resisted the lures of Potiphar's wife. For his chastity, Joseph suffered at the hands of the infidel wife. Having been thrown into prison, Joseph used God's gifts as a dream interpreter, thus regaining the freedom and becoming the Pharaoh's vizier, the right hand of Pharaoh. The rest of the book of Genesis is about Joseph's successful story as well as the encounters between Joseph and his brothers. Even though the story of Joseph, Genesis 37 through 50, misses God's intervention, the patriarch history is replete with, this is a story of divine providence. Through his wisdom, God turned the brothers' evil deed, selling Joseph, into an act of providence. Due to the fact that Joseph became Pharaoh's vizier, Jacob and his children, the seed of Israel, were saved from famine and death. This idea is encapsulated in Joseph's words, quote, "And now do not be distressed, my brothers, or angry with yourselves, because you sold me here. For God sent me before you to preserve life. For the famine has been in the land these 2 years, and there are 5 more years in which there will be neither plowing nor harvest. God sent me before you to preserve for you a remnant on earth and to keep alive for you many survivors." End quote. Genesis 45, verses 5 through 7. The last chapter of the book of Genesis, chapter 50, is about Jacob's death and burial and Joseph's death. The next book among the 5 books of Moses, called Torah or Pentiuc, is the book of Exodus, opening with the remark that the families and tribes deriving from Jacob multiplied greatly in Egypt, and a new Pharaoh, who did not know Joseph, took the decision to oppress the Hebrews with more forced labor, so that they may not increase in number and join in wartime the enemies of Egypt. And the Hebrews built cities such as Pithom and Pi-Ramses. The mention of Pi-Ramses actually help us date the Exodus event at the time of Moses, around 1250 before Christ. Moreover, the Pharaoh commanded the Hebrew midwives to kill the newborn if they are boys, but the midwives did not execute Pharaoh's order. With Exodus chapter 2, verse 1 starts the story of Moses from the priestly tribe of Levi, both parents or from the same tribe, the priestly tribe of Levi. Moses was born under Pharaoh's harsh plan to exterminate all the Hebrew newborn boys. Nevertheless, Moses' mother has hidden the baby for 3 months. Then she put him in a papyrus basket and placed it on the Nile. Moses' sister was watching at a distance, and Pharaoh's daughter, having come to Nile to take a bath, saw the basket and the baby inside and took the baby to be raised at the Pharaoh's house. So the name of the boy, Moses, is Egyptian, similar to Ramesses or Ramses, the son of God Ra. The biblical editor dropped the Egyptian divine name, probably Ra or Thoth or another divine name, so it remained Messes, which means son of, hence the Hebrew spelling Moshe or Moses. But the name is Egyptian, thus supporting the historicity of the event narrated in Exodus chapter 2. Over centuries, Holy Archdeacon Stephen, the first Christian martyr, in Acts chapter 7, verses 21 through 22, tells us, quote, Pharaoh's daughter adopted Moses and brought him as her own son. So Moses was instructed in all the wisdom of the Egyptians and was powerful in his words and deeds, end quote. At the age of 40, Moses took the part of a Hebrew slave, killing the Egyptian who was harassing him. And then Moses left Egypt, heading to Midian today in Saudi Arabia, where he married Zipporah, the daughter of the Midian priest Jethro or Ruel. The burning bush, Exodus chapter 3, is the first of the two texts that we're gonna interpret in our episode. We are going to dwell now on a very important biblical text, the call of Moses, which is Exodus chapter 3, verses 1 to quote. Moses was keeping the flock of his father-in-law Jethro, the priest of Midian. He led his flock beyond the wilderness and came to Horeb, the mountain of God. There the angel of the Lord, in Hebrew Malach YAHWEH, appeared to him in a flame of fire out of a bush. He looked, and the bush was blazing, yet it was not consumed, end quote. We are told that Moses was tending the flock of his father-in-law. Then he came to a place called Horeb, a Hebrew word which means destruction, perhaps a worship place in ruins. Also, the place was called the mountain of God, perhaps because a deity appeared there or was worshipped on the mountain. Remember, Moses, a Hebrew fugitive from Egypt, arrived in Midian, where his father-in-law was a priest of a deity worshipped on a mountain called hence the name Mountain of God. Was the deity of that place YAHWEH, the God who revealed his name to Moses in Exodus chapter 3? The text is silent on this topic, even though there are many interpretations. When Moses approached the mountain of God, he noticed something weird going on there. A bush was blazing, yet it was not consumed. And something even more puzzling. And an angel of YAHWEH, Malach YAHWEH, a messenger of YAHWEH, appeared to Moses in a flame of fire out of the bush. So imagine a flame of fire coming out the blazing bush, and in that flame of fire there was a being, a messenger of God, appearing to Moses. Exodus chapter 3, verses 3 to 5, quote, Then Moses said, I must turn aside and look at this great sight and see why the bush is not burned up. When the Lord saw that he had turned aside to see, God called to him out of the bush, Moses, Moses. And he said, Here I am. Then he said, Come no closer. Remove the sandals from your feet, for the place on which you are standing is holy ground, end quote. Obviously, the angel appeared for a brief moment because was not the angel appearance, but the weirdness of that blazing bush which never was consumed, which made Moses approach the bush. He was curious to find out the true cause of such an unusual, weird phenomenon. And when Moses came close to the bush, he heard the voice of God coming out from that bush, calling his name, Moses, Moses. And he replied immediately with that biblical Hebrew word, Hineni, here I am, or I am here. Please command to me. Then came God's warning, Come no close, remove the sandals from your feet, for the place on which you are standing is holy ground. The place where God appears becomes holy, kadosh in Hebrew, meaning set aside, cut off. That is why Moses needs to remove his sandals as a sign of respect. What we have here is something very interesting. Moses is attracted, fascinated by God's appearance as a blazing bush which was not consumed. And at the same time, Moses is ordered by God, do not come closer, stay where you are. This fascination and terrifying feelings are similar to what Rudolf Otto defined as a religious phenomenon, or as encounter with God, that mysterium tremendum et fascinosum in Latin, the mystery that terrifies and fascinates you at the same time. Fascination and sacred fear or terror in front of the divine. Then God reveals his identity as a preparation for the revelation of his personal name. Exodus chapter 3:6, quote. He said further, God said, I am the God of your father, the God of Abraham, the God of Isaac, and the God of Jacob. And Moses hid his face, for he was afraid to look at God, end quote. I can imagine how puzzled was Moses, this Hebrew fugitive from Egypt, when he learned that the God worshipped in Midian is the same with the God of his fathers, the God of the Hebrew patriarchs, Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob. The God who traveled with Abraham from the land of Ur to the land of Canaan. The God who accompanied Jacob's family in the land of Egypt. This God is now appearing in front of Moses, the Hebrew fugitive. God tells Moses that he saw the misery of his people enslaved in Egypt, and for that reason he, God, descended to deliver his people from the Egyptians and to bring them to a land flowing with milk and honey, to the land of the Canaanites, Exodus chapter 3:8. The same land of the Hebrew patriarchs prior to their descent into Egypt during a dire famine. The history of salvation paused somehow for a few hundreds of years, the years of slavery spent by the Hebrews in Egypt, but now is taking back its course with a fugitive Hebrew, Moses, an immigrant of sorts in the land of Midian. This is the God of history, or a perpetual moving from one place to another. Then God commands Moses to go back to Egypt and liberate his people, while assuring Moses that he, God, the God of patriarchs, will be with him. Exodus chapter 3, verse 13, quote. But Moses said to God, if I come to the Israelites and I say to them, the God of your ancestors has sent me to you, and they ask me, what is his name? What shall I say to them? End quote. And now God reveals his personal name. This is a revolutionary moment in the history of religions, when a deity reveals its personal name. Deities in ancient Near Eastern regions or cultures have common names defining their attributes or characteristics, their functions of the deity. For example, the Babylonian deity Shamash, meaning sun, S-U-N, is the provider of life with various levels because sun is indispensable for life. Shamash is a common, not personal name. Same with Hebrew word for God, Elohim. It is a simple common name meaning Almighty, because for Hebrews, the first characteristic of a deity is its infinitive power. Power to bring things into existence out of nothing and to sustain them in existence. Exodus chapter 3, verses 14 through 15, quote. God said to Moses, I am who I am. Ehyeh asher yehyeh. He said further, thus you shall say to the Israelites, I am, Ehyeh, has sent me to you. God also said to Moses, thus you shall say to the Israelites, YAHWEH, the God of your ancestors, the God of Abraham, the God of Isaac, and the God of Jacob has sent me to you. This is my name forever, and this is my appellation, Zikri, for all generations, end quote. God's revelation of his personal name, Yahweh, begins with the explanation of this name deriving from an archaic verb, hava, meaning to be. God explains to Moses his personal name as a sign of absolute self-being, which does not depend on anyone. He is the one who is, like the Septuagint rightly rendered in the Greek phrase, ho on, the one who is. Hebrew personal name of God is an imperfective aspect of the verb hava, meaning he was, he is, he will be, as Jesus, appearing to John the Evangelist, introduces himself in Revelation 1:8 with these words, quote, I am the Alpha and the Omega, says the Lord God, who is and who was and who is to come, the Almighty. In Greek, εγώ είμαι το Alpha και το Omega, λέγει Κύριος ο Θεός, ο ον και ο ειν και ο ερχόμενος ο Παντοκράτορ. Yahweh is an unfinished name, an incomplete verbal clause. He is, without a predicate. Why such a thing, which is not grammatically right? Because God did not want to reveal his name in its entirety so that the ancient Hebrews may not use, or rather abuse it in a magical way. But there is also a deeper interpretation of the unfinished name of God, Yahweh, he is. According to a great theologian like Yves Congar, Yahweh is a blank check for humanity, an act of synkatavasis or self-humbleness on the part of God, who invites those who call upon his holy name to participate in the ongoing making of God's personal name. He is a healer for a sick person. He is a father for an orphan. He is the hope for a hopeless person. He is the fulfillment of all our good dreams, intentions, and wishes. He is then here, then and now, to listen to our prayers, to respond to us in his unpredictable way. There is a whole theology related to God's personal name, but we just touch it here. But because of the time restrictions, we have now to pass to another text, very important. Exodus chapter 33, verses 12 to 23. It's about the glory of God and his invisible face. The second time when God appeared to Moses is about the end of his life, close to the age of 120. Here is the context of Moses' intercession. Exodus chapter 33, verses 12-13. Quote, Moses said to the Lord Yahweh, see, you have said to me, bring up these people, but you have not let me know whom you will send with me. Yet you have said, I know you by name, and you have also found favor in my sight. Now, if I have found favor in your sight, make your ways known to me, so that I may know you and find favor in your sight. Consider too that this nation is your people, end quote. The opposite obtains with Abraham, who was called by God to leave his country of Ur, and his family, and to follow God, but he did not ask where God wanted him to go. In the case of Moses, this man asked God, please make your way known to me. What is the context of Moses' request? Exodus chapter 32. The previous chapter describes the making of an idol, the golden calf. During Moses' absence of 40 days and 40 nights on the top of Mount Sinai, in order to receive the tablets of the law from God. The Hebrews lose their passions and ask Aaron to make a god in Moses' place. As with Moses, this God was viewed as a mere channel of communication with Yahweh. So Exodus 32 is not about pure idolatry, but rather a case of religious syncretism where the faith in Yahweh is combined with the people believes that a golden calf, an inferior deity of sorts, will replace the role of Moses as a bridge or mediator between the people and Yahweh, the God of Exodus. So the God here is a means of securing God's presence and not a God in itself to replace Yahweh. A metonymy or a substitute for Moses, if you like. We should remember the text in Exodus chapter 7:1, quote, "The Lord said to Moses, see, I have made you like God to Pharaoh, and your brother Aaron shall be your prophet," end quote. Was Moses God? No, but he was functioning as a bridge between God and the people of Israel. In Exodus chapter 33:7, God asked Moses to descend the mountain quickly because the people made a god in his place. Also, God reveals to Moses his desire to punish Israel for this great sin. Here, Moses, as the other Old Testament prophets, plays the role of an intercessor, a mediator, interceding for the sinful people so that God may forgive their sins. In spite of Moses' intercession, God is reluctant to forgive Israel for making the golden calf. Nevertheless, Moses goes on and asks God to erase his name, Moses' name, from the book of the living ones if he, God, does not want to forgive Israel. What a great example of a servant leader. Moses is trading his own life for his people's. Moses demands that his own life be taken if God will not forgive Israel. Moses is willing to take the place of Israel and to undergo God's punishment on behalf of his people. A substitutionary offering, as Jesus took the sinfulness of the entire humanity on his shoulders when he accepted to die on the cross of Golgotha. Finally, God's decision is not to forgive Israel. God agrees that the people may proceed to Canaan, but led only by an angel and not by God himself. God's displeasure with his people continues in Exodus chapter 33, the text we are to dwell a little bit on regarding God's glory and Moses' request. God reiterates that the people will be led by an angel. God himself will not accompany a rebellious people. Exodus chapter 33, verses 7-11. As a consequence of God's refusal to dwell among the people, Moses moves the site for communicating with God, namely the tent of meeting, outside the camp, and Moses continues to communicate with God. The tent of meeting is not a sanctuary, but just a simple site outside of the camp where Moses used to communicate with God, a type of oracle site, if you like. God does not dwell in the tent of meeting as he does in the sanctuary on the Ark of Covenant between the cherubim. In the tent, God descends only in a pillar of cloud to converse with Moses face to face as one man speaks to his friend Reuhu. Exodus chapter 33:11. Exodus chapter 33, 12-23 is about Moses pleading with God. Quote, "Let me know your ways," verse 13. In dealing with humanity is Moses' request to God. In other words, Moses asked God to show him the principles or means by which God deals with human sin. And Moses insists that God and not an angel may lead Israel to the promised land. God's response is in Exodus chapter 33, 14, quote, "My presence," in Hebrew, panai, my face, "will go with you and I will give you rest," end quote. Encouraged by God's response, Moses adds another request. "Show me your glory, I pray," Exodus chapter 33, 18. Moses asked God to show him visibly his presence, namely to be intimately tied up to God as two friends to one another. Exodus chapter 33, verses 19, 23. God replies to both of Moses' requests. First, God will let Moses know his ways or principles in dealing with sin of his people. And second, God will grant Moses partial but not complete experience. A complete experience of God's presence or face will be fatal for humans. Exodus chapter 33, 19, quote, "And God said, I will make all my goodness pass before you, and I'll proclaim before you the name Yahweh, and I'll be gracious to whom I'll be gracious, and will show mercy on whom I'll show mercy." What means to proclaim the name Yahweh? According to Exodus chapter 34, verses 4 to 6, Yahweh introduces himself as a God of justice and love. Something similar transpires from Hosea chapter 11, 8, 9. So when God said to Moses that he will proclaim the name Yahweh, means that God will show both justice and love as foundational traits of his personality. Moreover, God says, "I will show mercy on whom I will show mercy," meaning the divine mercy or justice are not automatic traits of God's personality, but rather under God's control. God is free to exercise his justice or mercy as he seems fit. Exodus chapter 33, verse 20. Quote, "And God said to Moses, you cannot see my face, for no one shall see me and live," end quote. This statement does not imply that God has no body, but rather that looking at his luminous, energetic body will destroy any human beholder. Exodus chapter 33, verses 21 to 23. Quote, "And the Lord continued, see, there is a place by me where you shall stand on the rock. And while my glory," in Hebrew, KABOD, "passes by, I'll put you in a cleft of the rock, and I'll cover you with my hand, and I will have passed by. Then I will take away my hand, and you shall see my back, but my face shall not be seen," end quote. The Hebrew word kabod, rendered here glory, is related to the verb kabed, to be heavy. So glory can stand for any sensorial manifestation or presence of God, either visual or oral. The word back alludes to a sort of likeness with the idea of God. So in the end, Moses could not see the face or the luminous body of God, but rather a part of God, his glory or his back, his likeness, in Hebrew, temunah. As a brief epilogue to my remarks on Exodus chapter 33, verses 12 through 23, I would like to point out here the presence of Moses on the top of the Transfiguration Mountain. Either we talk about Tabor or Hermon. Luke chapter 9, 28, 36 tells us that a few weeks before crucifixion, Jesus and three intimate apostles, John, James, and Peter, climbed a mountain. Luke 9:29-31, quote, "And while he was praying, while Jesus was praying, the appearance of his face changed, and his clothes became dazzling white. Suddenly, they saw two men, Moses and Elijah, talking to him. They appeared in glory and were speaking of his departure, Exodus, which he was about to accomplish in Jerusalem," end quote. Moses and Elijah, two great Old Testament prophets, are about to be brought through God's power on the mountain of transfiguration. And while Jesus was praying, Moses and Elijah were talking about Jesus' death or departure in Jerusalem. Why these two prophets, not other Old Testament prophets? What Moses and Elijah had in common? Both prophets, Moses and Elijah, wanted to see God's face, to be in God's intimacy. Please read Exodus chapter 33 and 1 Kings chapter 19. However, both they could not see God face to face. Moses saw only God's back, while Elijah heard the murmuring sound of God. However, centuries later, the desire of these two great Old Testament prophets, Moses and Elijah, was utterly fulfilled. God brought Moses and Elijah on the Mount of Transfiguration to behold Jesus' face, thus seeing God's face. It is a lesson for us here that our prayers, if they are done with pure heart, honestly, are fulfilled by God sooner or later, but always fulfilled.